Welcome back to Pivot Points. I am your host, Maya Rockeymoore, and I am very pleased, as always, to be joined by Ernie Powell of Ernie Powell's Grassroots Corner.
Great to be here this afternoon.
Richard Eskow, the prolific Richard Eskow, also his own radio show host, also activist extraordinaire. Richard, are you with us? He's not with us yet.
He's not with us.
But he will be soon.
Extraordinary anything before, but thank you.
We'll take that, Richard. Welcome.
You're also a senior fellow.
Well, that's just age, but thanks so much. It's always good to
You can be 20 years old and still be a senior fellow, Richard. Come on, just claim, be a millennial if you want.
Okay.
So, Richard, exciting happenings on the Senate side this week. Can you give us the rundown?
Yeah, basically there were two amendments introduced this week in the budget proceedings, both of which had to do with what they've come to call entitlements, although I'm not crazy about that particular word. One addressed Medicare and the other Social Security, and one was the Sanders-Harkin-Hirono amendment, which called on, which was basically, they're basically both non-binding, although they're attached to the budget at this point. But the Sanders-Harkin-Hirono amendment was asked the Senate to affirm that the chained-cpi, the so-called chained-cpi, which is a benefit cut in Social Security and also a tax increase on the middle class, should not be part of any budget deal or grand bargain, and that passed by voice vote. And then the Stabenow amendment from Senator Debbie Stabenow was a sense of the Senate to reject vouchers in Medicare, and that passed by a surprising 96 votes to 3. So both of these amendments designed to defend people who rely on Social Security or Medicare passed decisively this week.
So let's break this down. So was there a move to actually implement the chained-cpi for veterans, and the Sanders Amendment actually deflected that move?
It was not a specific... This is more a sense that, and believe me, I spent a lot of time in touch with the Sanders people, that this could happen to veterans as well as to the elderly and other people on Social Security. So it was more of a preventive move, a preemptive move against the chained-cpi, because we keep hearing that could be part of a budget agreement.
Okay, so this is where I get critical then. So it was a strategic move on behalf of Bernie Sanders and other progressives in the Senate to say, veterans would be affected by a chained-cpi, and we need to go on record as either being for or against this. And the fact of the matter is that they voted, and I say vote in quotes because they only did it by a voice vote, which means that nobody's really on record as being against it. Yet that doesn't mean that they're against the chained-cpi, and as Richard just said, the chained-cpi is a benefit cut. It doesn't mean that they're against it for senior citizens. It doesn't mean they're against it for all Social Security beneficiaries, including disabled and survivors. It doesn't mean that they're against it for SSI recipients, right?
Well, I asked the same question of the Sanders people and was told that, yes, it does mean that. So I think the best that can be said is that there's a lack of clarity on that topic, and that's unfortunate because we certainly would like to see the Senate on record as opposing the chained-cpi for all of these benefits, for all of these recipients, and not just for veterans. So I wish there had been a little more clarity on it.
And in one of your articles, you actually mentioned that Bernie Sanders wanted to call for a roll call vote, which means that he didn't want it to just be a voice vote. He wanted people to actually go on record as being for or against it. And yet he was talked out of it, quote unquote. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, because then we're getting into the sort of a very complex inner machinery of Senate procedure, but I would assume that there was a good reason, as in it might not get introduced, or I don't really know the answer to that. But I do know that that was his preference to have there be a roll call vote.
Are you willing to speculate, Ernie?
My speculation was that I read your piece, Richard, and my own just gut prediction here or speculation is that they wanted to protect some members that didn't want to be on the record.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think we're both saying essentially the same thing, which is that if he stuck to it, that they were going to block its introduction. But I think you're probably right, and I think that at the end of the day, will this prevent a grand bargain? Well, no, there's no guarantee of that.
But it gives us an interesting opportunity, Maya.
Does it?
Well, here's the opportunity.
Because I'm about to push back right here. Let's go.
Well,
let's go.
I don't. First of all, I wish it had been a real vote.
Right.
With really punching the hole and seeing who voted where. Having said that, it did pass by voice vote. Now the opportunity is to get everybody we know with all these senators and say, which way did you vote, and make them answer that.
Oh,
please. That's a grassroots opportunity.
No, I actually like that idea. And let's not forget, and I know, Maya, you're going to push back in a second, but also let's not forget that Sanders got a lot of people to sign a letter opposing the chained CPI. So I think, I think there's no protection right now against a grand bargain that includes this cut, but I think what we've got to do is take what we've got and build the best firewall we can with it.
Okay, so my speculation, as you all well know, the White House has put this on the table, is one of their best ideas, and I say that in quotes because it's an awful idea, for actually how to enter or engage into a grand bargain with cuts to entitlements with the Republicans. It's a lure, if you will. And I'm sure that they were on the phone trying to ensure that they maintain maximum latitude and flexibility in terms of continuing to angle for cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid in the future, because they didn't want anybody to go on the record. And I would argue that probably some Democrats in the Senate leadership as well were against a voice vote for that very same reason. So, ultimately, here we are again with progressives not playing hardball, towing a party line, even though Bernie is not a part of the Democratic Party and he's an independent and nominally not beholden to anyone, but certainly falling prey to that particular crew on this particular issue. And now, at the end of the day, it may be a non-issue. It may be a non-issue, but it still keeps this thing in play, this grand bargain in play, does it not?
Well, of course it does. I mean, I think there's no question about that, and I think that the answer to that is, okay, what do we do about that? And I think the answer is we organize and we stay on it. And I think, I think we can all probably agree that the White House, among other things, actually thinks that this horrible idea is good policy. Mm-hmm. I mean, I heard that from a very, very senior head of a very large cabinet office years ago. I mean, they believe in this. They think this is a good idea. So I think then the question is, Republicans clearly want it, and there's no way they'd rather have it than have it around the neck of the Democrats and a Democratic president. So I think the question is then, how do we stop it? And to the extent that the Sanders voice vote, while not what we would have liked to see, gives us anything to work with, I think we've got to work with that by saying this is an undemocratic idea. People voted against it. The senators weren't willing to stand up and say, I'm for it. Now you're going to try to force it down our throats by saying government will shut down or whatever crisis they invent at the moment. This is not democratic. You're not representing the people. You had a vote and turned it down. We're going to lean on you now. And I like Ernie's idea of laying the groundwork now for that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What's interesting about the White House position is that they say they like it, but they say they're going to exempt certain vulnerable populations from it.
Right. Well, they argue that it's a better way to calculate the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which actually determines your cost of living adjustment. And yet, if it's a better way, then why are you exempting?
That's exactly the point.
Why are you trying to exempt veterans? Why are you trying to exempt? Because it hurts people. That's why they're trying to exempt people from this.
Right. And the very notion, I actually take offense. I mean, this comes straight out of Pete Peterson's groups, by the way. He's the billionaire, as you know, who's been trying to cut Social Security for decades. But this comes straight out of his playbook, which is, but when you think about it, why are you trying to protect vulnerable populations with the Social Security benefits of the average woman who gets $890 a month at Social Security right now? Why is that where you go to supposedly protect vulnerable populations, number one. And number two, as you say, and Lawrence Michel has said at the Economic Policy Institute, that means it clearly does hurt people to do this. And by the way, number three, if you look at the way, we could get into a technical discussion, but the short answer is it's not a better way to calculate inflation for the elderly and disabled. It's a much worse way, and the way that's being used now is inadequate, understates inflation.
That's right, CPIE, which is the CPI that's actually for elderly populations. Right now it's an experimental measure, but, what does it do?
It takes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Richard.
Well,
please.
basically, what the CPIE does is it calculates inflation for the basket of goods that people on Social Security actually use. For example, the standard Social Security measurement uses taxes on a new car purchase, for example, which is whereas the elderly and disabled people are more likely to use public transportation. So it factors in things like public transportation, gives a greater factoring for medical care, which is something that these populations use much more of. So it's the out-of-pocket cost of medical care. So it's a much more accurate measurement that would also lead to a higher, not lower, inflation curve.
Richard, this is my last question because we are running out of time, but I don't want to give short shrift to the Stabenow vote because how many people voted for the Stabenow amendment?
Well, it was 96-3. So
was that a resounding Senate defeat for Paul Ryan?
It wasn't. I should have seen this coming because what it actually was the Republicans going back to their old trick of saying it's not really a voucher. That the Ryan voucher plan, it's not really a voucher because we don't issue little certificates. So it's really, I think they were just playing with words, but it certainly suggests that idea is, they're not on record as opposing the Ryan plan, but they're certainly on record as understanding that the very idea is political poison.
Wow. Well, here we are playing games still with checks that people rely on to purchase heating, purchase food, purchase housing, purchase medical care. Instead of having a country with leaders who realize that our growing income inequality is so bad that we really need to look at using policy to level some of the inequities that have been policy-driven over the past several decades, instead of looking to get us out of this fiscal mess that we're in because of elite Wall Street players and bankers and everyone else who had a stake in this international gambling casino that actually took us over a financial cliff in 2008, instead of leveling a financial transaction tax, we've got leaders who are actually seriously deliberating and debating cutting benefits that normal, everyday, average people need to survive, like Social Security, like Medicare, like Medicaid. And they're saying that this is the pathway to actually bring our long-term budget under control. And the fact of the matter is this is a transfer of wealth from lower-income people to the top upper 1 to 2% of Americans.
Well said.
That was a summary extraordinaire.
Well said. Perfectly said. Tax cuts that shouldn't have happened, 2 unfunded wars, an unfunded prescription drug benefit. I mean, that is the past that is still the present.
Richard, what do we have to do to break this juggernaut? And we got to let you go, but I am so just disheartened by some Democrats and definitely by Republicans who have chosen not to lead.
Well, I think the progressive movement has to do a lot of very deep soul-searching about which lines it's prepared to draw in the sand and say thus far and no further to the people that it has traditionally supported for elective office. I think the progressive movement needs to get very tough.
And with that, tough, I agree with you, Richard. Tough is the answer for the day. And I thank everybody for joining us for yet another edition of Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. As always, I'd also like to thank our production team of Peter James Callahan, Rich Webster, and Courtney Walters. And Ernie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to see you in person.
It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining me today. And I would like to remind our listening audience to join us every Sunday live at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on weactradio.com or 1480 a.m. if you're in the Washington, D.C. area. Until next time, America.
The way you pause, it sounds like there's another sentence.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.